This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a solicitation for business. The views and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not represent the official position of Title I. Now, let's get into the show.
Have you ever had a record commission month and then 2 months later wonder where it all went? In this episode, we're talking about why in real estate, making money is one skill, but turning commission into wealth is a completely different one.
And to help us break this down, we're joined by Kimmi Shaw with EXP Realty. Kimmi is known for blending real estate's experience with big picture financial thinking as a personal wealth strategist.
So Kimmi, to start, what was your personal experience with debt and how did it shape the way you looked at money today?
Well, that's quite a story. I started in real estate in 2007. So I've just passed 19 years. And like most agents, I was pretty excited when I'd get those commission checks and I, spend them. A few years later, I got married, had pretty much instantly got pregnant with twins. And through no fault of my own or my husband's, we both had, at the time, I was the regional CFO for a big real estate company here in town, as well as a realtor. And I was considered a full-time realtor because I was outselling a lot of the people who, were full-time, in addition to running 8 companies. So I had a good job. I was making really good money. My husband also, as a network engineer, was at a very big company here, and he was also making great money. I went in for a checkup, and the ultrasound doctor was pushing really hard against my belly. And, when you have twins, your belly's really tight. Anyway, he ended up hurting me and basically tearing one of my children's placentas off my stomach while lining. There were signs that something was wrong, but my doctor was planning to put me on bed rest 2 days later. And they just assumed that, this was just because I was progressing. And I really was very big. Basically, what happened is I was bleeding internally and one of my sons was losing nutrients and oxygen. And my other son could feel his brother in distress, and he literally started kicking. And I always like to say he kicked the floor out and caused my water to break at 31.5 weeks. It was very apparent that there was a problem internally when that happened. That night was an extremely scary night. We probably should have filed multiple lawsuits. We didn't, but we went $175,000 into debt overnight.
Wow.
Okay. And again, no fault of our own. We both have great insurance. But what happened is I ended up having to step down because I'm a mom, right? My kids are in trouble. I need to be at home. I don't know who they are, but they don't really look at any type of help or program based on what your money is now. They take it from what you were making at the time of the incident, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay. So my husband and I were not able to write off any of that debt. We had to pay it all. Well, as a real estate agent, you can imagine I freaked out. I sold our house so that we didn't lose all our equity. We ended up moving in with my parents, which was not the best decision for our marriage, but financially it made it so that we didn't go completely broke. We also liquidated our 401ks. And for somebody who is listening and has never had to do something like that, had about $73,000 between the two of us. We were still building a ton of money, but after we paid taxes and fees, it ended up being close to $39,000 that we actually got. That debt, you guys, it took me and my husband 7.5 years to pay it off. It was really hard. And during that time, we had some pretty bad marriage problems, like a lot of people do. We had to go to marriage counseling, and I don't think that anything could shake us from being married at this point, that's like, the shining,
The silver lining.
the silver lining, of the situation. And our kids are normal, healthy little boys. Both of our sons had underdeveloped stomachs, and they have really bad reflux. So, they both have had surgeries. My one son has had 7 surgeries. But because we had to hold them so much because of that reflux, my husband and I also had to have surgeries. So the medical debt just built. We did get it paid off after about 7.5 years, but it was a hard 7.5 years. And during that time, I started researching. I was like, you know what? There's not some secret sauce to how wealthy people become wealthy. I'm going to figure out what it is. And I started reading a lot of self-help books. I started just figuring it out. I started figuring out what I needed to do and what I needed to do for my family to start gaining wealth. When we got to a point where we could start investing, I picked a guy that came really highly recommended. I had 6 different people recommend me to the same guy, and it didn't work. I thought that I was going to make it. We were going to be fine, and it didn't work. I went to a real estate event called Spring Break, and I met somebody who asked me to, it was another realtor who said, hey, I've kind of taken on this part-time thing and it's really cool. Will you meet with me and my mentor? And I was like, no, I'm good. Right. Like I was kind of burned. I finally met with them and I didn't know who this woman was. Right. She was younger than me and I felt like I had a lot of experience. At this point, I'd been the CFO of multiple companies for years. We're talking 16 years as me being a high earning realtor and a CFO of multiple companies at a time. I kind of was just like, this young chick isn't going to help me out, right? To make a long story longer, in the middle of this presentation, she's showing me, I just said, listen, you seem like a really nice person. And I don't want to be rude, but I don't know you and I don't trust you. So what I really need you to tell me right now is how I do what you do, right? Like, I want to do it for myself. I don't want anybody else to have control of my money because the guy I told you about, I started off by investing 50 grand with him. And you have to understand that my husband and I have become money hoarders because we know what it feels like to be broke. And I need you guys to understand that there's a difference between being broke and being poor. Being poor is your choice. Being broke it happens to you. We were broke. And there's parts where it was such a suck fest, if you will. I don't even remember parts of my kid's childhood because it was hard. It was almost like it was like the trauma response that I would just forget.
Yeah, trauma.
I would forget portions. We were so unhappy that I think I gained 45 pounds the first 2 years my kids were born, and my husband gained 65.
Wow.
At that time, I was almost exactly 100 pounds heavier than I am now. That's how hard life was. We were eating the hamburger helpers for dinner because that's what we could afford. So that was my experience with debt and real estate. And every time, those real estate checks came in, they were gone. And I'm so fortunate that I had that type of income because we could easily still be paying on that debt, with interest and all that stuff. Sure. We could easily still be paying. My kids are 12 years old today. So we really only had the opportunity to invest and build wealth for ourselves for about 4.5 years. And I saw your face expression. You had no idea I went through that, did you?
I knew you were stressed, but I didn't realize that much. I was like, oh, okay, that explains a lot. Because I started remembering when you were doing closings and how stressed out you were. It's like,
well, the question becomes, we've just listened to this horrible story.
It's also a beautiful story.
Yeah,
but it's beautiful because you're here today. It's a horrible story if it continues.
Correct.
Spiraling downhill, which happens to a lot of people. Correct. The story still stays horrible. But you've got another part to that story, which is the good part of the story. So let's hear the good part.
I met with this woman and I asked her, how do I do what you do? And she sat back in her chair and she said, oh, well, that's a different conversation. And to make that story kind of come full circle, I ended up getting licensed as a financial strategist. And I became passionate about it for other realtors. Truly, a lot of realtors don't know how to invest. And I would say I couldn't find a statistic on this, but a lot of realtors want to be real estate investors. The statistic I did find is that approximately 26% of realtors, and there's a lot of realtors in this country, 26% own more than one property. That's a very small percentage. And I would say a lot of the realtors, again, I couldn't find a statistic, are truly living commission to commission. Part of the reason I got into the financial world is so that I could help them to not do that. And I could help them to fulfill their dream of investing in real estate. So part of what I do is help them invest in a cool way so that their money isn't permanently tied up, but that they can actually use their money to go out and put it as a down payment on an investment property or even a home. Right now, I think a lot of people are struggling. The average first-time home buyer is 40. And I don't think that that's completely different in real estate. I think we have a little bit more advantage because we can find those deals for ourselves. But what if I were able to help somebody do that faster? And that is what I do. Not only do I do that, but I have a program where I can help somebody using the money that they're making now, not having to earn more, pay off their debt faster. And that is what wealthy people do. They use their debt and their leverage to their advantage, and that is now what I do. And I'm very passionate about helping realtors about this. I was just telling Sherry earlier that it's very hard for me when I see agents that are 80, 85 years old, and they're still out there slinging real estate because they haven't planned correctly. And they've grown up with that mindset is, I'll just sell another house.
Yeah, they should be out vacationing, enjoying family, and not having to stress where their next commission checks.
100%. 100%.
Well, there's a little bit of a mindset change here that you're talking about, which is my parents' generation and even my generation, so I'm up there.
Yeah.
That really wasn't talked about very much. It was security. Get your home, secure your home, build your fort around that home. I don't even remember as a kid hearing people say, let's go out and buy another home. Or any of my parents, friends saying, we have another home here, we have another home there. That just wasn't the mentality. But that mentality needs to change.
It does, and it won't for at least a while. I'm calling a spade here. It won't. But investing has changed a lot over the last, let's say, 30 years. Okay. And here's why. Your generation, my generation, I remember as a kid, a teenager especially, being taught to, what do you want to do when you grow up? You've got to get a job where you've got a really good 401k and your company is matching you, right? You guys, everything in finance has a purpose. And I'm stating this as my personal opinion. Yes, there are great tax advantages to a 401k. But if you think about a 401k at its heart, it is an open-ended contract benefiting the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is all we had and all we were taught when we were kids. Think about how that's going to work for this generation, though. They're not like us, right? They're not like, what we were taught. My family, my mom worked at a job she absolutely hated, but her 401k was tied to that job. And so she pushed through. She pushed through and she ended up retiring from there with 2008 really, really hurt them, but she has an okay retirement plan because of pushing through. The younger generation, I call them jumpers. Okay. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a good thing because we have evolved as people. Okay. And this younger generation, they're not going to put up with what our generations put up with. They're not going to put up with a boss who treats them terribly. They're going to leave. And they're going to fight to get the money that they deserve. In my world, there's a girl, she's 22, she's making 10 grand a month. It's a lot of money for a 22-year-old. She owns a house, so there are things out there. But what I help people do is, like the younger generation, is set up their retirements so that it goes with them. I also set it up so that they can loan themselves money. Now, a loan is not taxable, as you guys know, right? They can loan themselves money to use to put a payment on a home or a second property, and their money keeps growing as if they never touched it, because that's how it works with banks. Okay, so you're actually earning interest on money that you've used. And the cool thing is a lot of these programs, not all of them, are are tied to life insurance, which life insurance will protect you from paying taxes. And if, this is very important, if they are set up correctly, it can be one of the best ways to invest your money nowadays as far as like retirement planning. Okay. What I do, and I specialize in that, Forbes magazine, I believe it was in October of 22, actually said that the products that I work with are the new 401k because it's tied to you. So your money's never going to be hurt if you decide to change careers or jobs.
Real estate agents, they always say make great money, yet still feel, stressed, behind, or they're like living paycheck to paycheck, right?
Yeah. It's because when you have a W-2 income, okay, you are able to not even budget, but you're able to figure out what your bills are going to do and when you need to pay certain things, right? With real estate, especially starting out, a lot of real estate agents, first of all, they get like the biggest check of their life. Instead of a salary, it's a windfall. Okay. And so it's like, right? Like spend. And those habits are developed very early in a real estate agent's career and they continue. Real estate agents are notorious for not saving money. And I can't tell you how many times I hear realtors say, my taxes are due, I got to sell another house, because they haven't planned for what they owe. I've been in real estate for a really long time, and I've had mentors who were some of the greats, if you will, here in Salt Lake Valley. And one of those mentors told me at one point in time, most real estate agents will spend their commission 3 times before it hits their bank account. And here's how it works. When an agent gets a client that they're excited about, they spend their commission. And then once they go under contract, they spend it again. And then once they close, even before it hits their bank account, they're spending it again. I think that that's a little extreme. And again, you can't say all realtors do this. Realtors are like anybody else and there's different personalities, but it's common. I know a lot of realtors just from, my past involvement in the brokerages, but realtors are sometimes stuck in that I can't afford it. But what I'm doing for people literally costs half of a commission check a year and they can have an amazing retirement.
Well, when you have, and I've spent most of my life, I was an insurance agent and I ran my own business for 30 some odd years. I'm real familiar with all these things you're talking about. And there is a huge pit that waits for all entrepreneurs, and really real estate agents are entrepreneurs.
Correct.
And you can be really, really good at your job and be really, really bad at your financial planning. And so sometimes it's almost like, I would have to say a lot of entrepreneurs are really good at selling themselves and marketing. They're not really good at some of the specifics like you're talking about with financial planning.
Well, and here's the thing. That money doesn't have to be for buying a house. What if that money was just bridging you between commission checks? Because what I see is real estate agents who are really serious about real estate, they'll have 1 bad month, maybe 2. It's very rare that a real estate agent has 3 really bad months. Okay. It happens, especially in the beginning. Like I say, it's, none of these are definitive statements, but until an agent can figure out their money, if they ever do, they're like on a roller coaster, right? They get this big windfall of money and then they stop working until they're like broke and their back's against the wall. And then all of a sudden they start working again. And then they get another big real estate check. You know what I mean?
Human nature is kind of.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
Wow.
So with that, is there anything more you want to say about the 3 months reserve?
I can. So if an agent were to set up one of these retirement accounts and they did end up in a situation, they could pull from one of these accounts to just cover their basic bills so that they weren't putting everything on a credit card and going further into debt. And again, the money actually, if it's done correctly, doesn't have to be paid back ever. And they're still earning interest on it as if they never touched it.
That's a win-win to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds like a win-win to me.
A lot of people think it sounds too good to be true. And again, if you pick the wrong person who doesn't fully understand the products and, you know, the strategy, it can be not great. But you do need to find people who know what they're doing.
Well, let's end it here because this is huge for realtors. How can agents use the money they're making right now to reconfigure like their debt instead of just like surviving?
Okay. That's actually one of the programs that I work with too. It's called debt to equity. Okay? And this is what wealthy people do is they use other people's debt or other people's money to make money for themselves. Okay. So without giving away the whole pie, right? Basically, we use the interest that they have in their home and we set up a home equity line of credit, and it's a true home equity line of credit. We have them make a huge principal payment on their mortgage, say $30,000. Okay. And then we have their paychecks directly deposited into that home equity credit. So basically you're making a big principal payment here. And then when you're, let's say somebody's making 10 grand a month or whatever, then you're making another big principal payment over here. And so you're literally, even though your home equity line is probably going to be 8%, where your home is, if you're lucky, you know, below 5%,
Right.
you're paying more interest, but you're paying it off in huge chunks faster. Once you get that, and by the way, you're also using this home equity line of credit to pay your monthly bills, buy groceries or whatever. Once you get it paid down to, let's say, $2,000, $3,000, you then take another big loan and put it against your mortgage again. Okay. We have done this where somebody had just closed on a house with a 30-year mortgage. It freed up $8,000 a month. They invested $2,000 of that and used the other $6,000 to use this debt to equity to their advantage. And they are on track to, on a 30-year note, pay it off in 12 years. And you taught me, Sherry, you taught me that if I use one extra mortgage payment a year is actually going to pay off your mortgage 7 years faster. As far as our debt to equity program, though, it's really cool. It's a huge value add as an agent. If you want to give your clients something more, if your clients have equity in their homes, think of how valuable you would become in their life by helping them to pay off a 30-year mortgage in 12 years, just making the money that they make. We had a client come to us and they were a little bit higher earners, okay, but when they wanted to start investing money, they could only come up with $500 a month. Okay. And these people were making well over 200 grand a year between the husband and wife. We used our debt to equity program where we were able to free up $8,000 a month. They then started investing $2,000 a month, and they had $6,000 that they could use to pay off their debt faster. When these people retired, they were going to retire with a good amount of money coming in addition to their Social Security every month. I want to say that they were going to have about 130 grand a year, and they were in their late 40s when they started this program. So it's a pretty cool thing. This is a big value add for you.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Kimmi, and reminding us that building wealth isn't about chasing the next commission. It's about being intentional with what you earn.
Yes.
Right. And homes are selling every day. So remember, your next closing starts with just a simple conversation.